Hi there. I forgot to record the second part of today's lecture. So now I'm re-recording the second part again. So it will be slightly different from the lecture in this afternoon, but yeah, the difference will be minor. So before the break, we have mentioned these three security attributes: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These three attributes are known as CIA triad, and it was well established in cybersecurity community and well recognized, well accepted by among researchers and security experts. Although these attributes are well accepted, some researchers feel like these attributes do not cover all the aspects of security properties for specific assets. And due to the complexity of the computer systems, there are different cases. So later, two additional attributes were proposed. The first one is authenticity. The second one is accountability. Authenticity refers to the property of being genuine and being able to be verified and trusted. So this is a very important property when two entities communicating with each other in the internet. For example, if you want to visit an online banking, then you may open up a browser, then you input your personal ID, and in this process, how your browser can make sure the server it's talking to is the real banking system. And also for the bank system to authenticate, to make sure it's the right entity to use certain account, then the bank system will request more information in addition to username, like a personal ID. So since the banking information is top sensitive, top important information, so there are extra measures for the bank system to verify the entity is the real entity who's accessing some account in its system. So that's why we will be asked to input the either one-time password that is generated by the key tag, or we are asked to approve some communication with bank mobile or mobile ID. And with the second one, normally you can see the browser shows up some message, 2 words or 1 word. And the bank system also sends this information via your telecommunication operator to your mobile. Then the user can compare these 2 messages. If they match, then they approve it. Then in this way, both the user and the bank have two-way authentication. Then this is about authenticity, to make sure the other entity in the communication end is the right one. It's the one it claims to be. And in real life, we have many different authentications. Like if someone knocks on a door, then you may be surprised, then you want to make sure you open the door for the right person. Then you may ask, who's that? And they will explain. If it's a friend or if it's a family member, then you can recognize their voice. Then you will open the door for them. If not, you may think twice whether it's proper to open the door to a stranger. And also when we travel to somewhere else, then we normally will go through this passport check. Then the officer inside will look at your passport information and compare the picture in the passport with you in person. Then they will make a decision whether to let you go through or not. This process is again to verify the identity or the identity of specific individuals, and for the system, they are verifying the entity that a system is claiming to be. Another security attributes is this accountability. So it is about the requirement that actions of an entity in a system can be traced uniquely to that entity. In other words, if an entity has done something in a system, then this behavior will be logged in the system. And if these actions, if this behavior is suspicious or is malicious, then the system will be able to track this entity. In most cases, it's some users that has logged to the system. And this kind of information can be used as an evidence when it is necessary to show to a third party or to show to a court when legal actions is necessary. So we have these CI triad attributes and also these two additional attributes. Before we go further, and I'd like to distinguish the security and privacy for you. And privacy, this term has been used a lot in recent years. And it is more related to human beings. In the general term means that someone can control what kind of his or her information can be disclosed to whom and to what extent. So in this sense, it's more about control the release of personal information to other party. It's not hide information, it's about control the information flow from the person to some other entity. So this is the difference between security and privacy. Security is a general term that covers several attributes, as what we mentioned, these CI attributes, accountability, or authenticity. While privacy is more related to human beings want to control the information flow to other party. And for most of people, this privacy could be related to their sensitive information or identity in the internet. So there are also some other attributes. Here I just list them, and we have introduced these 5 attributes. And for authorization, it's another property. It's more like an engineering mechanism to make sure that only authorized users can access certain resource in a computer system. And another 2 attributes in some textbook, it's utility and possession. For utility, basically it refers to some services that is usable. And for possessions, it is more related to human beings possess some assets in a system. If this ownership of some assets is violated, then this possession attributes is violated. It's like if you lost your laptop or lost your mobile phone, then you cannot access the files, the documents stored in these devices. So then it means the possession of the files which belong to you, but you cannot have it anymore. And there are some other possession issues in today's world, like we use the cloud storage quite a lot, and we may post or store our files in Dropbox or in Google Drives. And we can access these files installed in the cloud storage quite easily, quite conveniently. But in some sense, we lose certain possessions of these files. It's not that clear who owns the data. That's interesting, right? And lastly, we mentioned this, here is a typo. It's a privacy and anonymity. Anonymity is a part of privacy. So when we talk about anonymity, it basically means someone wants to hide its identity from others in a system. And we will try to protect all these attributes. That would be ideal situation. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. For different systems, they have different features, and their level of these attributes could be quite different. And we will focus on the first 6 attributes in this course. So we mentioned attributes, then it's necessary to mention assets. Assets is a general term that refers to entity. Here, entity could be a name, a user in a system, a username, or it could be a process, it could be a file. So we have for these general terms, this entity or assets. So assets refers to some objects or some entities in the connected, internet connected systems, which is normally called cyberspace. So in general, cybersecurity is the measures that try to protect assets in cyberspace. And these assets could be hardware or operating system, or softwares, or data generated from the operating system, or generated from software, and human beings. Our primary goal in cybersecurity is to protect human beings, that to make sure the individual's data, individual's asset, or organization's asset won't be attacked, or even it's under attack, and we try to use some measures to reduce the risk to the minimum. So these are the key points of the things we want to protect in cybersecurity. So in summary, we want to protect security attributes of some assets in the cyberspace. Now let's move to the second question. Why do we need to protect these assets? Well, if there's no criminal, if there's no attacks, then there's no need for us to protect them. Well, unfortunately, there are many unauthorized actions or operations on some assets. So unauthorized entities may be hackers, crackers, or sometimes cyber criminals or spies, and sometimes even colleagues. Here, whether it's adversary or it's normal, it really depends on whether the operation, the action is authorized or not. And there are some other adversaries, like law enforcement, which could hurt the security attributes for some assets. And the governmental organizations and intelligence agencies which might want to get personal information or some communication traffic. And all of them has a general term. We call them adversary. So it's a widely used term in cybersecurity community. So adversary take some unauthorized actions on some assets which violate the security attributes of these assets. So what, in general, what can adversaries do? Well, this is a figure that lists some of the malicious behaviors that adversaries can do. For example, if we have an email attacks carried out by some adversaries, then the adversary could send some spam email to someone and then to fish to treat for the recipient to click some link. Then that link could be linked to phishing websites. Then this phishing website could gather some personal information or some account information of this victim. And even worse, if this victim use the same account, same password for different sites, then the attacker behind this phishing site could use it to try some other general used websites, like some social media, Facebook or Twitter, or sometimes Google. And in this case, it may lead to some financial loss of a person or some reputation loss of a person. So it's just a simple example that what can adversaries do. When it comes to a computer system, then some adversaries could modify some file in a system or could even delete the file in a system. And sometimes even just encrypt the file, ask the victim to pay for decrypt it. So there are a lot of this kind of attacks against the files in a system. And it can be done by virus, it can be done by worms, it can be done by Trojan horses. So we will learn some of these terms in future lecture. So now we summarize what we have covered so far. So we mentioned we want to protect the security attributes, including these CI attributes, is authentication or authenticity and accountability. Sometimes for human beings, we may also want to protect a person's privacy and anonymities. And these attributes could relate to data or could be relate to some processes in a system or could be related to hardware. And all these are the objects we want to protect. And there are some adversaries, and these adversaries could hackers, crackers, and spies, and intelligence agencies, governments, organizations, or sometimes unfortunately, ex-partners who want to get some information from their ex-partners. And it's like a battle between individuals, between security experts against the cyber criminals or hackers or adversaries. And what we will learn is some measures in between that help these assets to be able to have good security level against some attacks from adversaries. I took this figure from a book, The Art of War, which was quite popular in China And he has many famous quotes. One quote mentioned, like, if you know both yourself and your enemy, then you can win 100 battles without a single loss. So it's more about, okay, now you are in a battle as an individual or as a security expert. Then how can you defend your system? How can you defend your assets? And somehow you need to know what the adversaries are and what kind of tools they can use, how they think, different aspects for the adversaries. And before we continue, and it's important that we know some basic general cybersecurity terminologies that were used among cybersecurity community. The first one, vulnerability. It refers to a weakness in a system that allows a threat source to compromise its security attributes. So it could be one attribute, or it could be several attributes together. And there are many examples for these vulnerabilities. For example, if there's no encryption of files in a system, then if this system is accessed by some attacker with some tools, then all the files will be able to read, and the content will be disclosed to the attacker. So it will be a vulnerability, like without the encryption of the files. And for some people, like might use a weak password, then it might lead to the consequence that an attacker can easily use some password cracking tool to break the password. There are some other vulnerabilities like misconfiguration or outdated anti-malware applications. And there are also some other vulnerabilities when it comes to different systems. The second term is threats in cybersecurity. So it refers to any potential danger that is associated with exploitation of certain vulnerabilities. For example, like a virus, it exploits some vulnerabilities in a system that it can replicate itself when the user opens up some file, like hacking toolkits or remote access Trojan horse. And in these tools can reside in the victim's computer and silently open up a channel and then send some sensitive information from the victim system to the attacker. Like the user in the victim system types something, sometimes a password, then they can use some tools to capture these keystrokes and then send these keystrokes to the remote attacker. And like this phishing or ransomwares, we will introduce all of these terms in future lectures. These are all threats to different attributes of an asset. When threats come to true, then it becomes attacks. So attack refers to certain unauthorized actions that violate security attributes of an asset. So its threats come into true. To know the attacks better, we can classify attacks into two general categories. The first category is passive attacks, And the second category is active attack. For passive attack, it makes use of information but not affect system resources or operations. For example, if some hacker hack into a system, read the content of the file, and then close the file, just leave, then the user cannot detect it. It's quite difficult for the user to detect this unauthorized behavior. And another example is if a device is used to capture some wireless communication between two devices, then whether there's such a device in between, all the communication traffic, all the traffic between these two entities remains same. So in this case, a passive attack do not modify or change the traffic flow, the content of the traffic. So in general, it's relatively hard to detect since there's low change, there's no difference from original operation. So because of this, somehow it's easier to prevent as long as we enforce enough security measures in the system or in the communication. For active attacks, it's different from the passive attacks. It will change system resources or operations after this attack. For example, if an attacker hack into a system and delete a file or change the content of the file, then you see it leads to some change in a system. This resource refers to a file or the content of the file in this example. And attackers can also use some devices to stop the traffic between two communicating entities. And also it can modify the content between two communicating entities. So there are several types of active attacks. The first one is masquerade. The second one is replay. The third one is modification. The last one is denial of service. And there are some other attacks, and we can just look at these 4 examples to give you an idea of active attacks. Since the system and the operation will be changed by active attacks, so it's relatively easier to detect, but for some of these active attacks, it's quite hard to prevent, especially for the last one, the denial of service. So the first passive attack is release message contents. In this example, Alice and Bob is communicating and they want to have some communication that is not released to others, that is not understandable to others. But if they do not do anything with their communication, then it would be relatively easy for an attacker listen to their traffic and intercept the packets between these 2 machines. Then the attacker will be able to read the content of the communication between Alice and Bob. Here, Alice and Bob are not necessarily human beings. They are mostly used as devices in a communication systems. Now, for these communications, then to prevent this type of attack, what we can do is to encrypt the traffic between Alice and Bob. In this case, even Debs can intercept all the traffic. He or she cannot read the content of the message from Bob to Alice or the message from Alice to Bob. the second one is called traffic analysis. Suppose here, Alice and Bob, they learn some security the security course, and they have some security knowledge. They know, okay, we can use encryption to encrypt our message before we send it out to the recipient. Then in this case, Alice encrypted her message to Bob, and Bob decrypted. Bob encrypted his message to Alice, and Alice used some key to decrypt it. So in this scenario, even DES could be able to capture all the traffic, all the content. But since the content itself is encrypted, so DES cannot read the content. But in some cases, to get to know when Alice and Bob is communicating, is contacting with each other, is enough for DES to extract some information. For example, if these two machines or two entities are suspicious criminals, and this DAS is intelligence agency, and or some police, then they suspect some criminals, they would be contact each other and send some information, and maybe to plan a terrorist attack. And in this case, if they communicating each other quite often and or at a certain time or period before a big like celebration in a city, then it might give the police some extra information. They need to be more prepared, or they need to take some action to prevent the potential terrorism attack. For the first two, they are passive attacks. You see whether DES is in presence or not, all the traffic from Bob to Alice, from Alice to Bob remain the same. And let's look at some active attacks. The first one is masquerade. In this scenario, DES pretends to be Bob, send some message to Alice. Here we can think of an example that suppose Bob is the boss of a company and Alice is a finance accountant, and DES is an employee in the company. So suppose every 10th of each month, Alice will get some information from the Bob about adjustment of salaries for some employees. So DES pretend to be Bob, send a message to Alice. Hey, Alice, this is Bob. And this month, I feel like DES has done pretty good job. So I decided to increase his salary for this month by 1,000 kroner or by 10,000 kroner. So please proceed with this salary adjustment. So we saw some extra countermeasures against this. Alice has no idea to be sure whether this message is really from Bob or from some other party, either DES or some other hacker. And it will be quite tedious for Alice in this example always to call Bob. Okay, is this true? Is this message really from you? Because some of the message could be really sent from Bob. So this is about the authenticity we previously mentioned. If it happens, then the authenticity of some traffic is violated. Another one is called replay attack. This attack in the internet, so we use the previous example again. Suppose this month, Bob did send a message to Alice, indicating to increase the salary of DES, who is an employee in the company. And in the following months, Des could repeat this information and send it to Alice for like before 10th of each month. That's where the salary adjustment is taking place in the company. And for Alice, one thing is it might be difficult to distinguish whether it's a message from Bob, or it will be quite annoying, quite tedious to check all these messages with Bob by phone or by some other manner. So this is a totally imaginary scenarios, and here this Alice and Bob and Des could be just some devices in a connected system. Then for these scenarios, all the system would be automated. It's not like how we communicate as human beings. Another active attack is a modification attack. In this case, here suppose Des has done pretty good job and Bob decides to increase his salary this month. So he sent a message to Alice. Hey Alice, Bob has done pretty good job and I decided to increase his salary by 1,000 kroner this month. Oh, it's not a big amount of money, but still it's nice to increase the salary. But that's not what Des thought. Des thought, okay, I have working very hard and I think I did more than just 1,000 kroner. So what if Des can intercept this information and just add one more zero in between, then change the 1,000 kroner to 10,000 kroner. In this case, for all the other information in the message is a real message from Bob, but there's some minor modification that has been done by Des. So for Alice, it's quite difficult to verify or to detect whether this message has been modified or not. And this is a modification attack. The last one is called denial of service attack. And this attack is more for some servers, especially web servers, or some systems that provide some services to others. In this case, Des could send a flood of requests to the server such that the server cannot provide services to its authorized, legitimated customers. And then we call it a denial of service attack. And in practice, one single entity won't be able to initiate this denial of service attack, or it will cost too much to carry out denial of service attack from one single device. In general, it will be using a botnet, a network of computers that have been hacked, and send distributed message to the services. This is called distributed denial of service, shortly DDoS attack. So with the previous attacks, now we will see there are some different types of attacks. How can we achieve the secret attributes we mentioned? And then we came to security controls, and it also termed countermeasures or safeguard in cybersecurity. So they are actions that are put into place to mitigate or reduce some potential risks. We can also divide security controls in different categories. And the first category is administrative controls. It's more about the management of a system or of an organization. And it includes some personnel training in cybersecurity, increase the security awareness among employees. And when some security policy is made within an organization, then the administration can enforce these policies into action. And the second category is physical protection. We mentioned in assets, like they are hardwares or infrastructure or internet cables or communication links between different devices. And to protect this infrastructure, this system against the denial of service or some other type of attack, then we need to have some physical protection. For example, to lock the server rooms with a high-level security lock, or hire some safety guard, and you lock some computers in some rooms. Like in the military base, we have the fence and together with the security guards. So you see, like there are several levels of defense against some potential break-in. And there are the third categories are technological or logical controls. And this control includes some cryptographic tools, algorithms, and we will introduce encryption, hash functions, digital signatures, and message authentication codes. And on top of cryptography primitives, there are security protocols. These protocols we will introduce as well in this course. And in addition to these protocols, in the communication systems, there are also some other security mechanisms, such as a firewall or intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system. And sometimes we need to use anti-malware software to scan out potential virus. So for all of these, they are the major focus in this course. And for the first two controls, it's like some general controls, and there's not much technical detail, technical aspect for these controls. And that's about today's lecture. And in next lecture, we will introduce a little bit more on these security controls. And then we will introduce you a tool to detect some potential attack. Okay, that's it.